Can't help but notice, is that cookie clicker?
Of course.
I think everybody gets addicted to that game at some point.
Yeah. Sorry. All love cookies now. And at home, for lunch, I have only chips now. I get back everything really fast. It's addicting.
It's pretty fascinating, just the idea of these item games. Like it's not too hard to make your own. And really, it's just, a lot of it is understanding how numbers go up and then, being able to track them. It's really good practice for like metagame development and progression and understanding like a long playthrough.
Yeah. It's quite hard to make it complex, which this is. A lot of aspects and a bunch of different things.
Well, the thing is, that game has been around for a very long time. So, I mean, he's had a long time to just keep kind of adding to it and expanding it and understanding how those kind of games work. I mean, that was pretty much the first one that I'd ever heard of. 2013, so you're talking about 12 years worth of developing that game.
Yeah. It's amazing if you can do all that time.
Do you play any other idle incremental games like that?
I have played, or I am playing, Idle Slayer, which is also an incremental. I can't even, I can't do much now because it takes so long to do everything. I've been at it from 1,500 days almost.
Wow.
Since I started. Yeah.
1,500 days. That's pretty crazy. Yeah, like, they're very similar to like simulation games. Like I worked on SimCity, and like under the hood, all SimCity is essentially kind of an idle game like that. That's just like slightly more complicated, but it's essentially like it's a spreadsheet underneath. with like a visualization on top. Amazing. There's some recent idle game that a friend of mine was playing that he was really into. Wonder if I can remember which it is. Yeah, there's just something fascinating about watching big numbers go up.
Are we just gonna do Krita today, or are we gonna do some other stuff too?
So the idea is to learn the basics of Krita and then create something that we bring into Unity to kind of go through the whole process. One of my intentions is for us to use the project that we opened up before, since it already has a 2D thing set up, and I figured out what the problem was. Did you have that same problem where you had like a crash? It just comes down to removing the tutorial package and deleting the tutorial folder. So it's essentially all a bunch of tutorial specific stuff that you don't really need anyways. But yeah, the basic idea is to try to demonstrate how you can get your own 2D art into the game so you could customize or make a 2D game yourself from scratch. Are there any particular classes that you're looking forward to?
What do you...
Like, I mean, there's upcoming classes like programming, animation, UI, kind of bringing it all together at the end.
Animation can be... Well, what's the final project mean? Is it to do something?
The idea is to, one of the last classes is showing you how to create a game manager that kind of like helps you, make it into a game. You might have a character who can run around, but you want to have some kind of a challenge or whatever. So yeah, the idea for the final project is to, encourage you to try to put all the different pieces together into something that resembles a game. And your first game, so I had an art teacher who used to tell me, your first 1,000 drawings are going to suck, so get them out of the way as quickly as possible. And I think that the first game's like that too. Like you should have you should have incredibly low expectations, and then and it's really like a lot of people start games, but very few people finish them and release them. And it's really easy to start games, and it's easy to get into the middle of a game. The way to success is to actually find a way to finish games. There was a thing like a website called One Game a Month that encouraged you to make a game every month, and there was like an RPG system or whatever that kind of like rewarded you for doing that kind of stuff. And I think that's a great idea. Like for the first couple games, like try to just make quick, simple things and have people play them and give you feedback and get used to it and then build on that. A lot of people try to make their first game like something so huge that and then you get into it and you keep adding to it. But in order to finish a game, you need to actually, towards the second half, start like reducing and subtracting down things. So that's one of the key challenges. Like there's a guy named Derek Yu who made the game Spelunky, and his recommendation is to make small games, like tiny games at first, and build up to something more. And that like game jams, that's one of the biggest problems is, you're trying to make a game within 48 hours. Most people, they try to make too much of a game, and then at the end, they don't wind up finishing. And so it's really, I think I see Vincent. That's probably the two of them. All right. Well, there's two more people who may arrive shortly, so I'm going to give them a little bit more time. But I wanted to go ahead and ask those of you who are here or who are joining us on the stream to go ahead and make sure that you've downloaded Krita, which is a Photoshop alternative image program that we're going to be using today. So if you haven't already, make sure you go ahead and download Krita. It doesn't take long to install, not as long as, say, how long Unity takes to create a new project. One of the other things I'll be doing along the way is, just to give you a preview, is that, so in the previous class, we were using the 2D platformer micro game, and we tried to create a build, but we ran into some problems. But I figured out what the problems are, and so we can fix them. So the plan for today is for us to create some 2D art in Krita. I'm going to show you how, and then we're going to import it into Unity. And if you were here previously, let's try to import that into that project that we used in the last class, the 2D micro game, so we could fix that up and get your art into that setup, because that's the ultimate goal, and we'll try to make it build properly this time. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started, and then I'll keep an eye out to see if I spot anybody arriving late. So let's see, uh, we got 3 people here, 1 person on the stream. That's wonderful. Let's take a look. So Krita is a 2D art program we're going to be using today, and it is open source and free. So we're going to go over the basics, like creating a simple sprite that we can use in Unity. We are going to export from Unity with transparency so that it looks the way we want it to in the Unity engine. We're going to import that art from Krita into Unity, and we're also going to set it up in Unity, but then we're going to jump back to Krita, make some changes, and go back into Unity and see how easy it is to iterate like that. Because if you just go ahead and export your sprite into the Unity project, you can jump back and forth between Krita and Unity quite easily, and it's a really quick way to iterate and make changes. And so the idea is to set you up so that you can use your own custom 2D art in a Unity game. So why are we using Krita? Well, number 1, it's free. It's also open source, which means anybody can improve on it, and it's constantly getting improvements. It's also an industry standard tool. It's got brushes, layers, everything that you would get in Photoshop for the most part, except a lot of the fancy new stuff, which you don't really need. It's even got animation tools if you want to make 2D animations. It can do both freehand drawing and painting plus vector shapes. So it kind of combines Adobe Illustrator, which does vector shapes, with Adobe Photoshop. Now, if you don't understand the difference between vector and raster, the 2 different sides of this, I'm going to explain that along the way. But it's a fairly important thing to understand. It has really strong community support, and you can even get free brushes, vector libraries, texture packs, and other things. And it's pretty customizable. So that's really cool. You might have heard of GIMP. GIMP is another free open source image program. Now, GIMP is really good for editing photos and retouching pictures that you take out in the real world. But if you want to create illustrations or you want to create game art, Krita is a much better tool. And to compare it to Photoshop, Krita's free. Photoshop, you're going to pay $23, 23 euros a month, that adds up, especially if you're not using it constantly. So paying the monthly fee for Photoshop is pretty ridiculous. And a lot of people are looking for alternatives to Photoshop because of this. So what we're going to do is go ahead and open up Krita. And what happens is when you do open it up, you'll see this window here, which is just how, kind of like the starting window. And so to get started, we'll click on New Image. And you can set up, different specifications here. But actually, there's a lot of them that are already predefined. And there's a group of them down here that say texture first. And this is actually a really quick and easy way for us to set up, say, a 512 by 512 sprite for our game. You don't need to worry too much that it says texture. It just happens to be 512 by 512 and meant to show on a computer screen. That's why the resolution is here. But you could use Krita for making things that you print that are much higher resolution, like you're printing out a flyer or something. And there's like all kinds of templates, like for comics or different designs or different size pictures, and even for creating textures. I'm going to show you some of the texture tools. But we'll go here at Custom Document and choose that predefined 512 by 512 to get started. You'll note that it's RGB, and that's for creating things that are expected to be viewed on computer screens. So first off, here is your workspace. And what you're going to notice is that if you scroll the mouse button in and out, just like in Unity, you're zooming. Click and drag the middle mouse button and you're moving it around, just like in Unity. So it's actually pretty easy. Now, one of the things that you might do right off the bat is you might say, I got a brush and then I seem to have a color. I'm going to paint, but wait, nothing's happening. That's probably the first confusion that happens when you're starting with something that has an opaque texture. Mm-hmm.
Oh, did you choose texture 512 by 512? Oh, I wonder, it might be that I already had, so my background opacity was set to 0. It's possible that your background, if you go to content, was your background opacity set to like 100%? So yeah, chances are, so you may have, I think that what happened is, you discovered when you created a document, your background had a 100% opacity and you were able to right away start painting. But if you create a document that starts out with a transparent background, the layer here starts at opacity 0 and you won't have anything on it. So that's one of the first things that trips some people up. But yeah, you can turn that opacity up so that you can start painting on this background layer just to experiment. And you can see you've got a color picker over here. You can move around the circle to get different shades. And so like, just experiment with kind of painting, trying to paint using different colors. The other thing to notice early on is that up here, this slider is what controls the size of your brush. So if you set it down low, you get a small brush. If you set it up higher, you get a larger one. One of the cool things that you can do actually is you can hold down Shift and drag left and right to easily interactively change it. So if you find yourself changing the size of the brush a lot, then hold down Shift to make that change. And it's easier. Oh, Shift and left mouse button. So if you do Shift and then left mouse button and drag, I wonder if it's because you're on a Mac that it's different, because I don't think I have anything custom. So, but yeah, if you do wind up having that problem, then you can just adjust the size up here, and we'll figure out at a later time what actually is up with your stuff. But you can see, that you're painting on this background layer. Down here below, over here on the side, you have these things that are called dockers, which are these windows that have options, the layers one being an important one. Right below it, you have brush presets. And you can actually switch the kind of brush that it uses. And some brushes have different, you can see some have fuzzy edges. Some, kind of paint with, some do smearing like this. And they even have, there's all kinds of different brush shapes. So you'll probably although there's a multitude of brushes, you're probably going to wind up finding just a couple of them that work for you. And at the very beginning, you have erasers. So if you click on the very first thing here, you get an eraser that erases all the way down to transparent. And there's a smaller eraser here as well that's square shaped. But really, any of these brushes can become an eraser. And that's because when you have a brush selected, regardless of like what the size is of this brush, you can actually switch it to become an eraser by just clicking this button here. Actually, no, set eraser mode, this one here. So you see how this turns blue here? That means my brush will switch to erasing. Now, if I switch it off, it's painting again. This is all while we have the brush tool selected, the freehand brush tool. So now you know basically how you can select some different brushes, how you can switch from painting mode to eraser mode. And you also know how you can set the size. Now, for our purposes today, chances are you're not going to want to make some kind of strange abstract art like what you're seeing here. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create something that will work in our game, like a character or a prop or an item or a pickup, something that you might use. So what we're going to do first is we're going to look at how we work with layers, because layers are really useful. And actually, in the beginning, to get to get some shapes that are on top of a transparent background, which is what you probably want for a character or a prop or a pickup or something, you're going to want to add a new layer on top of this background and make the background 0 opacity. So you can see, like, I can make this layer called background 0 opacity. Now, we need a new, what we want is not to paint on this layer. It's easier for us to control if we create a new layer on top of this layer. So you can click this plus button to create a new paint layer, which is good if you want to paint something on it. Let's see. So if I turn off my paintbrush, I have green selected, and I can, paint here if I was going to create a freehand character. So now let's keep that paint layer there, and you can click on it, add a little bit of paint to it, because we're going to use that as an example. But if you look next to the plus, there's this little arrow down here. If you click it, there's other kinds of layers. The most important other kind of layer here is this one that says add a vector layer. So now you can see that when we add a new layer, the current layer that's selected is colored blue. And if you look closely, that there's a little icon here. You could actually change the name of this to whatever. But the thing that's important is to notice the icon here and here. One of these icons looks like kind of like a paintbrush on a piece of paper, and the other one looks like some lines connected by dots. And those icons are what tell you that this is a vector layer and this is a raster or paint layer. So I'm going to show you the difference. What we'll do is we'll use the eye to turn off our paint layer, and then we'll click on our vector layer. Now, if we try to paint with a brush, we'll find out we can't. And that's because a brush is for paint layers, not for vector layers. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fine. If you accidentally close some of your things and want to get back to like a default workspace, if you click on Window, Workspace, and then click Default, that should bring things back to where you have something that looks like this. That work for you? Excellent. All right, so now we have our background, which is set to 0 opacity so that you can't see anything. And we have our vector layer here that we discover that we can't paint on. But what we can do on this vector layer is some really cool stuff. We can use these tools that look like geometric shapes to draw shapes. So for example, if I have this square tool selected and I click and drag out a square and let go of it, I get a pretty wonky looking square. You may get something that looks slightly different. But that's a square under there. But what we do is, if we switch to the tool options here, let's click this select shapes tool and click on this square so that's selected, and the tool options here has options for like the dimensions, the line, and the fill. So if you click line, right now this line thickness is kind of insane. So if I switch it down to 5, so now I've got a box, a square, that has a solid black fill, which I could change to something else. And it has a green line that I could also change to something else, like black. I can change the thickness to make it thicker or thinner. And if you look at how the corners look, you see how this is a tapered corner. It's not sharp corner. We can actually change that by clicking. It's super hidden. This is one of the most hidden things. I don't know why they would do it this way. But if you want nice sharp corners, click the down arrow here next to the thickness and click on the sharp corner. You notice you also have a rounded corner and you have that beveled corner. So let's go back to what the difference is between vector and paint layers. So what we have currently is we have a shape on a vector layer. And you'll notice we can change the dimensions of it, but we can also change its line thickness. We can edit the colors to change them to other things. Like vectors are highly editable because they're created programmatically. So, but that's different than a raster layer. So let's hide our vector layer and go back and bring our paint layer back up. So we can't select our green blob or whatever you created here with this tool because it only works on vector layers. You can click this transform tool and you can move it around and scale it. But you'll note that your tool options don't give you the ability if you have this thing selected, like with this tool. You can't change the color, you can't change the thickness, and there's lots of other things that you can't do. When you create a paint layer, you're kind of like more locked into what's there. And it's very hard to change or edit things. Whereas if we switch back to our vector layer, if we click on this, if we click on this tool here called Edit Shapes tool, we can do some cool things like change it to a rounded rectangle like this in an interactive way that makes it all the way a circle. We can also click this Convert to Path button, which changes all of these points where we can just click and drag them and move them around. And even if we go and create something else, like a circle over here, we can still go back to this thing, double click on it, or click the Edit Shapes tool and go back to adjusting the shape. You can pull this out like this, move this around. So basically, vector shapes are highly editable. Another thing that's a benefit is that they create really crisp and sharp edges. You might think, oh, when I zoom in here, it still looks kind of fuzzy, but that's based on how the software renders onto the screen. You could actually take a shape like this circle, and you could keep zooming it up bigger and bigger or smaller and smaller, and it wouldn't change its resolution. Whereas if you do that with this, and it will very quickly start to get kind of wonky looking. Let's see. Oh, I have two things selected. So to go back to my presentation, we covered how to create something new. We talked about how we could zoom and pan with the mouse button. You can use the view menu to fit to the view if you want to. We talked about how to get back to the default workspace layout and how a layer can be set to 0% opacity, making it hard to see. We also talked about being able to paint on the layer. We talked about, okay, a paint layer has a fixed resolution, and if you scale it up, it'll start to look really pixelated. You have greater color control and finer light and shading, and it's usually used for photos, but it can be used for illustrations. You can convert a paint layer to a vector layer, but it's really tricky. And it's kind of hard to do, and it's really uncommon. You don't generally do that. Because what you normally do, you start with a vector that can be infinitely scaled up and down. It has a smaller file size because it's just math underneath the hood. It's really commonly used for illustrations, logos, UI, and game art. You can easily convert vector to raster. And most importantly, you can keep modifying it non-destructively. You can undo things that you've changed. You can work on something else and come back to it. So when I say something looks kind of pixely with a paint layer, I'm talking about the difference between like the really crisp image here on the left-hand side, this, and how you see these kind of jagged edges. That comes from trying to scale a paint layer or a raster image. And that's something that that vector layers don't fall prey to. All right. So one of the things I want you to spend a little time doing is just acquainting yourself with the different tools here, in particular for a vector layer. So if you find you created a mess, you can click the trash can here to get rid of layers and give yourself a new layer. But play with it, try out the different tools. Like for example, as I mentioned, all right, this thing always remembers some of the ridiculous last settings for thickness for some reason. Let's see. Not 5,555, just 5. So you can create a square, you can create a circle. Now, if you drag out a circle and you get an oval, if you hold down Shift, you'll get a perfect circle. So, and the reason why that one looks so large is probably because it has a humongous, I don't know why the default of my line thickness got ridiculous. But as I mentioned, it's the same with, if you want a perfect square while you're pulling out, hold Shift. And actually, the combination of Shift, Control, and Alt can do interesting things. So just, and you guys on Mac might have a different experience, but like, all right, so if I hold down Shift, I get a perfect square. Let go of Shift, and I can have a rectangle of any shape. If I hold down Alt, I can move it around and position it where I want, and then let go of Alt. And then if I hold down Control, it grows from the center instead of from the corner. So depending on how you want to create things, I would really love to know how I can stop having thickness so humongous. Or just, you can remove lines entirely. But you have a circle tool that works much the same in terms of like getting the perfect shapes and etc. You have a polygon tool, and I wonder if, you know what, it's taking the size of my, this is what it was. It's taking the size of my, my brush and making that my line thickness. So if I set this down to really low, it has very thin line thickness. I had my side. So now I'm the idiot because I discovered what I was actually doing wrong. But yeah, this polyline tool means you can go, let me put this down low, click, 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 and then click to close. So you can make a shape of any shape you want. And once you've got that shape as a starting point, you can edit those points to get them exactly where you want. You can even double click in between points to add a point. You can click a point and hit delete to subtract a point. So you can pretty much get whatever shape you want. You can also draw just a straight line, or like a line that's multiple segments, and then hit enter when you're ready to be done with it. So again, all these pieces can be edited even after you're done with them. You can increase the line thickness, you can change the color. And then as I mentioned, this tool, the Edit Shapes tool, can be used to pull and move these points around. And you can even, if you have a point selected and you want that to be rounded instead of a hard corner, you can click these options over here in Tool Options. You can also right-click and choose like Smooth Point or Symmetric Point. Symmetric locks these handles to the same length on either side. Smooth means that you can move them one independently of the other when it comes to moving in and out. I think you can even like, oh yeah. And this pen tool does much the same. It starts, or oh, actually no, it's a calligraphy thing. It creates calligraphy type shapes. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend like, maybe 5 or 10 minutes to just, I recommend you just doodle and explore and try different things. Because after this, we're going to do an exercise where we actually try to create like a character or a prop or something that we would actually use. So yeah, spend a little time, and if you have any questions, let me know. And of course, standard things like if you have something selected, you can press delete to delete it. That's one of the nice things with vectors compared to raster images. Also, is quite easy to make those changes. I'll show you real quickly that there's a couple of other interesting tools here. When you have if you have a shape and you select it with the Select Shapes tool, if you want to rotate it, if you put your mouse on the corner, you got to get real close to the corner, but you'll see the rotation widget show up and you can rotate. And then the other thing you can do is if you get close to one of the sides, if you get too close, you'll get to where you're adjusting the shape. But if you get just above it, this is the shear tool. And so with a combination of rotating and shearing, for example, you can kind of create like an isometric kind of look. I can do Control C, Control V to copy things. So you can see how I can kind of build like an isometric box shape using this method. Control Z, Control V. Put this over here. If I select all of them and move it into the center, click this, bring this over here, and then shear this like that. But there's actually other tools, like there's grids in here that you can create an isometric grid and snap to the grid. There's a regular grid, of course, that has snapping. I'm not going to go into snapping today, but be assured that it's actually in there. Another thing you might have noticed about working with color is that you can select a color over here, but that the colors that you're currently using show up over here. And so, for example, if my foreground color that I would create shapes with is red, it's red here in the front. The background color is a color that sometimes you'll use background color for other things, but it's also, if you click these, you can quickly swap them. So it can be really easy to have the two colors that you're working with and jump between them. And then if you want to just get black and white, you can click this right here and you can swap between black and white. This is like patterns and textures that you could paint with or fill with. This is gradients. So I'll show you a couple of other interesting things while we're kind of just dabbling here. So you see I just kind of select everything and hit delete to get rid of stuff here. If you know that you're doing something symmetrical, you've got these symmetry mirroring tools up here. If I turn on the vertical mirroring tool or the horizontal mirroring tool, you see I get a split here. If I put something on one side, actually I think this only works in paint mode. Let's see if we create a paint layer. If I were to paint with Let me try green. Yep. So for example, if you know you're making a perfectly symmetric face, you know, you could do something like this. And you can even set where the symmetry is, which is interesting. You might have different applications for that. And you can do the same by switching to, you know, if top-down symmetry can work like this. Let's see. Oh, it's because I deleted my layer and didn't notice. You can actually activate both of them and put them where you want. Now you might say like, oh, that might be an easy way to create a repeating texture. Well, there's actually an even better tool for doing that. If you disable those two and look at the third tool over here on the end, wraparound mode. So what that does, this is perfect for creating repeating tileable textures. So you can turn it off and see what your texture is, but then you can flip it back on and see what it'll look like when it's tiled. And you can even, you know, paint on it while it's in this mode. And then if you flip it off, you see what you've actually got. And so that can be a really good way to like line up the sides and see what the repetition looks like. So, I mean, if you're creating textures for 3D models that are going to repeat, or textures for a background or whatnot, that's a cool trick. And, you know, that's why Krita has this, you know, some of the predefined dimensions are for textures of different sizes, 1024, 2048, 256, 512, because it is such an easy tool for doing textures. And of course, if you have your own like drawing tablet and you like using that instead, like Krita absolutely supports drawing tablets and pressure sensitive tablets and stuff like that. Oh yeah, so I mentioned a little bit about how, you know, if you have something that is, for example, if we had a vector layer, and let's say we created some vector art on the vector layer, but let's say now we want to paint. We can't paint on the vector layer. What we can do is we can convert that layer to a raster layer. And you do that by clicking on it and doing flatten layer. And by doing so, it still says vector layer, but the name is just, you know, can be anything. But the important thing is that it changed the icon here. Now I can actually use the paint tools to paint here. So it's totally possible to start with vector, convert it to a paint layer, and put the finishing touches on it. What's a really smart thing to do before you do that, though, is, for example, before I convert this from a vector layer to a paint layer, you can right-click on it and do duplicate layer. And then what you do is hide that layer. And you can even lock it so you can't mess with it. Think of that as your backup. So it's like, okay, like if I convert this new copy, if I flatten the layer so that I can paint on it, if at any point I don't like what I did and I want to go back to an editable vector layer, I can just go to the layer that I saved, and I can say, actually, you know, I want this, looks like I screwed up and I didn't back this all the way back to being a vector layer. There, now it's a vector layer. So now if I duplicate, hide this one, make a change I don't like. Oh, it's because I didn't convert it. Flatten the layer. Now it's paint layer. Now I don't like what I did. I go back to the vector layer, select this, change it, and then duplicate it, and then convert it and copy it. So basically, layers can help you organize your work, but they can also help you easily back up your work. I mean, you can save old versions and stuff like that and all that, but it can be, sometimes it's easier just to have your changes and the things that you're working with here. And as I mentioned, if you, let's see, if I get rid of this, So if you have a layer and you want to make sure you don't mess with it, there's a lock icon over here, and that will prevent you from being able to make any changes. So like if you have something you absolutely, whether you want to see it or not, if you have something you want to make sure you don't accidentally change, locking the layer can do that. That can be useful if you just want something in the background. Because when you work with layers, you'd be surprised how easy it is to think you're working on a layer. You think you're working on this top layer, it turns out you're working on the middle layer and you screw a bunch of stuff up. So it's a good practice. If you have a layer that you don't intend to change, go ahead and lock it down. Now, something that I should have done up to this point probably is that anytime you do any significant amount of work that you don't want to lose, you should save your file. So if you do go to File, Save, you're going to see that there's a bunch of different ways that you can save this file. But the file format you want to use is the default one, the .kra file. And so that's Krita's own format. And so if I'm like, my awesome art.kra. So what that does is it makes sure that it saves all of the layers and any of the information that's useful. And so that's like what we call your source art. That's the thing that you might come back to if you need to make changes. But when we actually export the art to go into Unity, instead we'll use the export method and we'll choose a PNG, because PNG is the best quality for using in Unity. So let's see, we covered flattening a vector layer to turn it into a paint layer. We said, hey, we really need to make sure smart person is going to keep something in vector for as long as possible, because you have the ability to make changes as much as you want. Whereas as soon as it becomes raster, as soon as it becomes a paint layer, you lose a lot of that editing opportunity. We talked a little bit about like the different changes that you can make to shapes. You can change, the color and thickness of the line here, even removing the outline. You can change how the corners are. And you can see the difference between like rounded corner and sharp corner. We saw how you can use this tool to change the corners, convert to path, and actually edit the points, which is really similar to what we were doing with 3D objects when we were learning to move vertices around on a 3D object. These vector shapes are 2D objects that have vertices that you can move around. You can change the type of corner there is. We saw that you can mouse over the corners to rotate and to shear. And we just saved our document as a Krita document. All right, so now we're going to start on essentially what we're going to try to bring into Unity. So what I want you to do is to think about some kind of 2D art, like a character or a prop. It could be a background, it could be anything you want. But essentially try to create something on a transparent background that we can bring into Unity to try out this process of importing your own custom 2D art. So what we'll do is we'll get started on that now, and we'll have that run up to the break at 6:30. So if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat. Post them in the YouTube chat or on the Discord. Either one, I'm keeping an eye on both. Don't worry too much about if it's the best art that you've ever created, because this is really just an opportunity to try this out. What I want is for you to have the confidence and the knowledge to be able to create your own art and get it into Unity. Well, currently you can only change the color of the entire line, but you only want to change color of that one segment. Oh, the entire line. Okay, go to tool options. And then, oh, well, first select that. All right, so now you see that's There's actually a cool trick that I just discovered. I saw Benjamin here creating Pac-Man, and it reminded me that if you have if you're on a vector layer, let me just clean this up a little. Actually, I can't delete that because it's locked. If I'm on a vector layer and I use the circle tool and I pull this out, and then if I grab this, this tool, the edit shapes tool, and click here, you see these two things here? You can actually click one to create a portion of a circle. It's kind of hard to see because I also, here, let me switch off the line. But you see that what I'm doing here is I can create a portion of a circle. So I could create a half circle. This just kind of shows you the midpoint. And you can drag it from either side. And so if I then took this and I said, all right, if I grab this and I convert to path, then I take this and I double click here. Let's see, can I add it? I think I can't add a segment there because there is no segments, only the line from here to here. But yeah, there's some, I think that there's some other tricks here that I probably haven't figured out in regard to some of the procedural tools. How can we fill an oval shape or other shapes we're creating? So Christian, let's see. Oh, you found it, exactly. So yeah, when you have that shape selected in the tool options, this is your color fill, which of course you can have no fill. If you have no line, then that's going to look kind of hard, kind of weird. I think that you can also, let's see. I mean, there is a fill tool here, but I think that is used for, yeah, it's not used with vectors. If you had a paint layer and you painted, for example, a circle or a closed-in area, and you wanted to fill it in, you could use this paint tool to fill it in. These are different selection tools that you might use if you're selecting things. You could sampling a color can be useful. If you have already used a color and you really want to find, you really want to make sure you use the same color, but you've gotten off of it because you selected some other color. You're like, oops, like I really missed that green color that I had. You can click on the eyedropper and click it, and it'll select it as your foreground color. So I should probably get to work creating a super awesome character that I can use for my example to import. So let's see, vector layer. Did you, all right, so if you click it, you click the thing there, if you go to that thing there, that one, And then, yeah, try click that. Exactly. So yeah, if you have a closed vector shape, you can fill it in as well. If it doesn't fill it in by default, you might have it automatically filling in. But if not, you can just select it and go to the this fill tab. I can choose what color I want. So here's some interesting tricks as well. So let's say you have two shapes. I've got these two squares here, and let's say I'm creating kind of like a skeleton kind of thing. If I select them both and I right click, you see you get vector shape actions, logical operations. If I click unite, it turns it into a single shape by merging those two shapes together. I mean, you can also do something like, for example, have one shape subtract from the other. So if I do logical option subtract, it removes the front shape from the back shape. So in my case, I really want to create, no, what is this? Kind of looks like a monkey guy to me. But yeah, by right-clicking on things, a lot of times you can find, some interesting, if you just want to rotate 90 degrees or mirror horizontally and vertically, those are there as well. I feel like there's a way to align things to make sure that two things are aligned directly next to each other, but I'm not finding it currently. Let's see. I would expect that. Oh, I think I know actually. If I go to Dockers, there's a lot of Dockers here that are not shown by default. I would be surprised if I didn't find one. Arrange. I bet that's it. Yep. So there's a Docker that actually helps me. So if I had this like this, and I want them to be centered, I could open this arrange Docker and have this align it automatically. So if you want it to be perfectly aligned center left to right or up to down, you can even have this create, if I create multiple things and I want them to be spaced out equally, you can use distribute. Distribute, I could align vertically by center, I could distribute evenly. This is also where you can change the order. So you see currently this smaller box is in front of the bigger box, but if I select the smaller box and I change the order to make it go lower, it's now below the other box. So yeah, that arrange Docker, which you get to from, let's see, settings, Dockers, arrange. That's a useful one. So if you have that out with layers and tool options in your color selector, chances are you'll have a lot of things covered. Let's see, so get to the point where you're getting close to having something that you would be willing to export. So whether that's a character or whatnot. So I'm thinking this is going to be my awesome character. You can actually, if you click one thing and hold down shift and click the other thing, you can click multiple. So for example, I decided like, oh, that black was a little too harsh. Maybe I just want to use this color, but a little darker. All right, so if you've got your masterpiece or something close, go ahead and take it. You should have it on a transparent background. If for some reason you happen to delete your background and you wind up with things that aren't transparent, you could always add a paint layer, zoom out reduce the transparency and pull one layer over the other. That's another thing you can do is you can literally drag to reorder layers if you're working with multiple layers. You can drag one layer above the other or below it. But take your art, and since this is 512 by 512, it's kind of relatively small anyway, so you might want to take it, position it roughly in the center and make it so that it kind of fills. Doesn't have to fill exactly. Another thing you could do if you wanted to is instead of making your art bigger to fill the space, you can use this crop tool here. So if you click on crop tool to crop the image, and then you drag out a box, generally you don't want a bunch of extra space around your image if you can avoid it. So get the crop tool to where it's roughly surrounding your area that you want, and then hit enter. And so now you basically have, you know, your character art or your prop art on a transparent background. You can get rid of any excess layers. And then before we export it, the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and save the Krita file. If you see the star here, it means that you have changes you haven't saved. Go to File, Save to make sure you've saved your changes. So now what we want to do, before we export to Unity, let's just go ahead and open up our previous project. So you can either open up the project that you created in the last class, which could be useful because it's already got a character that can move around in a 2D environment. But if you didn't have that for whatever reason, then you can just create a new project that is a universal 2D project, and then click Create Project. So that'll be an empty space. I mean, if you really want to, you can open the two. You can also create a 2D platformer microgame project. But for those of us who were here previously, what we can do is instead of going to a new project, we can just click to open the project from last time. And the first thing I'm going to walk you through is how to fix the problem we had before with that the error that was causing us build problems. So of course, it'll take a second for Unity to open up. You can open the previous project, or you can create a new. Yeah, that's the one you did in the last class. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Is we're trying to fix up that one that we did in the last class. Let's see. So let's see. You'll probably, this. You might remember from the last class. This was my wonderful creation with my meteors in the background. And we had a problem that I may have already fixed here, but I'll walk you through the fix for yourself, which is. When we tried to do file, build, and run, we got an error that prevented the build from working. And the way that we fix that is you can click on this button here, Project Manager, or Package Manager, my bad, Package Manager. And that opens up the Package Manager here. And if you look in, you should click on In Project. Those are all the things that are currently in our project. And if you type tutorial, not necessarily in big things, you're probably going to find something that says, let's see, tutorial. I don't have anything because I think I already fixed this project. But let's see, you should see something that says tutorial framework. And there's a remove button. So if you inside Package Manager, you search for tutorial, you find tutorial framework and a remove button over here. Click it, and it'll take a little bit, but it'll remove the tutorial framework, which isn't at all necessary for this to work. Now, after you do that, you're going to get an error. And that's because you also have a folder in here in the projects, a tutorial folder, which I have already deleted. But so let's see, when you find that tutorial folder, just press delete. So now you might even notice that the error that comes up is in assets, tutorial callbacks. And that's the hint that that folder is part of the problem too. So if you get rid of both the tutorial framework and the tutorial folder in your project, now you shouldn't have the problem that we had before. So let's just make sure that it fixed it. Go to File, Build Profiles. And this is where you make sure that you have the current scene in your scene list. If not, open your scene list and drag it in here. Or add open scene. Then, you'll have whatever Windows or Mac or whatever. And then just click Build and Run. You'll need to choose a folder. So for example, you can pretty much just create a new folder on your desktop or wherever. Let's see, oops. So I call mine new folder. I guess I could give it a better name than that. Let's see, my 2D game. So when you create that folder, you click it, it shows up here and you click select folder. So now it's going to take a little while to build. Shouldn't take too terribly long. But because we chose build and run, as soon as it's done building, it should pop up the game and you should be able to play it immediately after it's done with building. So you see it finishes its build, it's spinning for a second. And if you wait, 1, 2, 3, you might see something like this. You might hear some funky music. And that should be the wonderful 2D game that you created during the last class. If you didn't happen to do that, if you missed the last class, you can see the video that we posted. All right. So now that's what we're going to bring our 2D art into. So in order to do that, we need to actually add our 2D art to one of these folders under assets. And we can export it right into there. So actually, let's do, there's not currently an art folder. Let's create one. Let's see, the XC run command requires the command line developer. When did that come up?
When I launched.
Are you able to play the game without it? I mean, yeah, I would say cancel then. Yeah, the Mac users got some kind of XC run request to install something, but it didn't seem to be necessary. So there you go. So now we did what I really wanted us to do in the previous class, which was to be able to export our game so we can share it with other people. Because until you have a build of your game, it's not really finished. You can't really share it. And now you've accomplished that. But let's take the next big step and actually take our art and put it into this game. Because then we'll have the makings of making a custom game that's really our own. And so, like I said, to do that, the best way to do this, to export from Krita into Unity, is to export directly into Unity by exporting into a folder in the project. So if you click on Assets and you right-click and click Create Folder and just name it Art. So now we have an empty art folder here in Assets. Now, you might wonder, like, well, where is that folder so that I know how to export into it? The easiest way to find the location of any folder in your project is to right-click on it and click Show an Explorer, which I get an Explorer window, but other people, like, what do you Mac people see? If you right-click on the folder you just created, oh, you get Reveal in Folder. Reveal in Finder. But the result is the same, which is that command that you just used will show you that this folder in our Unity project is actually in, for me, it's in Documents, Unity Projects, My Project, Assets. And here it is. It's the art folder. This is where I want my exported art to go to. So I just need to remember this path. C users, my name, Documents, Unity Project. Now you might have saved your Unity project somewhere else. That's totally okay. You just need to be able to find your project, find the assets folder and the art folder, and that's where we want to export from Krita. So now let's go back to Krita. We got our awesome art, we've saved it, but we can't export, we can't do anything with the .kra file. We need the PNG export of this file. And that'll maintain the transparency, and it'll have the best possible look in terms of resolution. So click File, Export. So now, so I was saving to the desktop, but I need to go to that folder, this one. I need to go to C users, Mutagen, Documents, Unity Projects, My Project, blah, 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 blah. There's quick ways to find that if you, like, let's see, if you pin your folder that you're working on here, but I can just find it. See, so what did I say it was? It's in Documents. So if I go to Documents, Unity Projects, My Project 1, which is a great name for this project, Assets, Art. So I'm in the folder now. So if you found the folder, you've got the first challenge. Now you need to make sure that you save it as the right file type, because by default, it's still saving as a Krita document. So make sure you, like, this is a huge list. I mean, you can pretty much export anything you can imagine. It even scrolls a bit. But what we want is this one here, PNG image. PNG is the most common image file format you're going to use in Unity because it preserves transparency, and it looks the best in general. So myAwesomeArt.png, if I save it, it'll ask me for something like, okay, well, how much compression do you have? Oh, well, I kind of want this to look really good because it's so important. And then you can pretty much leave everything else the same. So now I jump back to my Unity project, and if the art folder is selected, hey, there's my art. If I click it, you'll see that it appears with a checkered background here in the preview under Inspector. If this is down like this, then you might have to pull this up. So you've got your art and it's inside Unity. But before we move away from this, I want to draw your attention to these settings here. Because you imported as texture type, it probably automatically selected Sprite, 2D, and UI, but if not, that's what you want. You don't want it on multiple mode because it's just a single sprite. So switch that to single. Wrap mode clamp is right. I changed filter mode from bilinear to point, which means it's not going to have any kind of filter that changes the way it looks. But then if you make any changes here, you need to click apply before you move away from here. So that's what we need to do to have correctly imported. We need to make sure that we've set Sprite 2D and UI, single for sprite mode, and point for filter mode. So now, if we want to add this thing to our world, we can just drag it and drop it right in there. And it creates a new sprite using our art. So there we go. And I can use this to resize. If I hold down Shift, it'll maintain the same dimensions. So naturally, if this was a guy hanging out in the background here, I would put him there. But let's say that I actually want this to be part of my player character. If I take this sprite that was created, and I drop it on top of the player prefab, you see it puts it here and it becomes a child of the player prefab. I can kind of move it, scale it to where I want it. And then you might remember that, like, to change so that something is drawn in front of something else, we adjust the order and layer. So I just need to make the order and layer high enough so it draws in front of this. So I didn't test this before class, so let's see if this even works. It quite possibly is going to be wonky. But I'm going to see if I can make my custom art that I brought in, the head, if I can make it the player character. So look, yeah. I mean, it looks probably pretty crappy. The animations don't necessarily match up, but it follows the character. So of course, you know, this is not the right way to make a different character, but it's a way. And it looks pretty goofy. So whether you wanted to attach your new art to a character that already exists, if you want it to be a prop, remember in the previous class, we actually drag things into the tiles to make it so that we could paint them as tiles. And you can do that. So now essentially you have the ability to take the art that you created, bring it into Unity. And of course, now that it's in here, I save my project, and if I click File, Build and Run, this time when it creates a build, it'll do it much quicker because it already built once, and it's only needing to build the changes. So now, when it pops up here, I have a game that has a character that I created in Krita. If I Alt F4 and go to my go down to my desktop, let's see. I'm gonna, because let's see, what did I show you? So I created this new folder called My 2D Game. And as we mentioned before, that has a bunch of different files in it. If I want to run the project, I just double click the exe. There you go. You can see this is the new version. And then if I wanted to package this up and send it to a friend to say, hey, please play my awesome game, I would compress it to a zip file first, because it makes it much easier to share. And so I now have this file, my2dgame.zip. It's a single file. And if I upload that to my Google Drive or to my Dropbox, I can send somebody a link. They can download it. They would essentially extract it. So when you extract a zipped up file, you get a folder, and then they can double click on that and they can play your game. This is pretty much the same process that you would use if you were going to share your game on a place like itch.io. So I think I mentioned it before, but itch.io is a lot of times where you're going to, if you make a game jam game, a lot of times they have you put it up here. There's tons of games here, most of which are free. And when you're learning how to make games, this is the best place to upload your game so that other people can access it. So for example, this is my page. These are some of the, this is a game jam game I worked on. This is a game that I made personally that you can play in the browser. So when you click on the game, you can see it loads Unity. If I make this full screen, so you can export to what's called WebGL, and that means that it can run in the browser. And that's actually a great way to get people to play your game. Let's see, can I kill the sound? Yeah. So a great way to get people to play your game is to make it so they don't even have to download it. They can just play it in their browser. So I made a game that's a mashup of tower defense and match 3. And so you make towers when you match 3 things. And if you get 3 of the same things next to each other, they upgrade to the next thing. But the point is that you can do this with your games. And as you go to game jams and you develop other games, you can actually add them to, I encourage you to create your own account here on itch.io. And for example, let's see, I think that I can actually go to, if I go to my dashboard, I can see that okay, if I go to, no, not that. I think I have to look at analytics. I can see how many people have played my game. 322 people have looked at it. 136 people have played it. 1 person rated it. 2 people have commented on it. And you can see that all the plays happened pretty much here at the beginning of, let's see, 10/18. That's weird. Because I think they mostly came at the beginning of the year. Oh, it's probably because of the time. Yeah, exactly. So let's show the last 365 days. There we go. So yeah, here we have browser play. Views are up here, browser plays. You can see I released the game near the beginning of the year in 2025. So this is January, this is probably February. This is when all the action happened. Oh wow, there was actually a couple of plays. Oh, that's surprising. Interesting. I thought it was completely dead. But it's fun to look at the analytics. And what's cool for me is, okay, I released a game, and 136 people played it. My next game, I want to have 300 people play it. And so you can kind of manage your own expectations and figure out how you can improve on your, because it's one challenge to make a game, but the even bigger challenge is getting people to play your game. But it does take persistence. Like the guy who created Balatro, which blew up and became a humongous game, that wasn't his first game. It was like his 5th game. He made a bunch of games before that weren't particularly successful, and he just did it as a hobby. So, all right, so we created an awesome character. We made sure that we have a 2D game in Unity that we can export it to. We create a folder in Unity where we want to put it, and we export a PNG. So for example, now if I go back to my awesome art, and let's say I'm like, actually, I don't like this color. I want it, let's see, not the, I want the interior color, this one. I want to change that one to lime because, oh yeah, that's so much more attractive. So now, of course, I would save that. If I click File, Export, I can save it over. It's going to, by default, go to the same space with the same name. If I save it, I'll replace it. Now, if I just switch over to Unity, Unity already has the change, and it's already here. So I can jump back and forth between Krita and Unity, and I can make adjustments. Oh, yeah, got it, because I didn't convert this to path. So I'm like, oh, this would look a lot cooler if it went like this, and if this was actually purple instead. All right, cool. And export again. Replace, yes, boom. Switch over, boom. So it's much easier to set up for change if you go ahead and have this where you're exporting directly into your Unity project, because then you can jump back and forth between Unity and Krita, and it's much, much easier to iterate like this. And you see how fast that is. And that, it pretty much just gets the changes and updates things. So pretty straightforward. All right. So we talked a bit about your import settings and how they should be set to single. And it usually automatically picks sprite 2D and UI, but if not, you should do that. And how you can adjust your sprite, all the usual things, order and layer. You can size it to whatever you want. Using the rect tool is the way that we usually size something. Holding shift will have it do it uniformly. So create the challenge that I have for you going forward in the class is to create more images in Krita, export them as a PNG, and import them to Unity as sprites. Like, consider that you can replace as much of this stuff as you want to. You can actually, for example, if I dragged in my awesome art, let's say that instead of a character, this is like something I want to be a platform. As it stands right now, let's see, let me get rid of that. If I try to jump on this thing, it's probably not going to work terribly well. And you have an idea why? Starts with a C. You're right, it has no collision. But it's super easy to add that. So if I see over here, I have my sprite selected. If I add component box collider 2D, and if you have your widgets on and you look closely, you'll see a green outline there. Kind of hard to see with this tool. There you go. So now, if I start up my game and try to jump on it, it should be the case that it actually prevents me from falling through. So you can see where you're already in the position where you can bring in your own props, your own character, your own stuff, things that should prevent the player from falling through the world, put collision on, or things that should block the player. And so you can use the 2D platformer microgame as the basis to customize it and build your own game. The same can happen for the first-person shooter microgame, bringing in your own 3D stuff. We do have a class, an intermediate class for fundamentals of Blender, where we do the same thing with 3D objects. We create 3D objects with Blender, export them, and bring them in. 3D is a bit more complicated, so that's why we don't go into it in this class. So let's see. We may wind up getting done with this class a little early, but what I have is I have a presentation to do here at the end, so this is a bit more of a lecture, so get comfortable. But I wanted to teach you a little bit about your newly found 2D art skills can go to good use for creating design documents. Back in the day, design documents were like these big, huge written books, the Game Design Bible, and nobody does that anymore because it's a terrible idea. See, when I worked at Maxis on SimCity, I learned from this guy, Stone Librandi, who was the lead designer, who works at Riot Games and teaches at Carnegie Mellon, worked at Blizzard for a while too. He came up with this idea called the one-page design document. He actually has a GDC talk about it that you can watch him talk about it. And on SimCity, we use this idea of creating this really highly visual design document to describe systems. And so here you can see, this is like, you know, the layout of the transportation system that moves trading and manufactured goods around the city. I don't know who that guy is. But he started coming up with this idea when he was working on the Simpsons game. And he was trying to figure out how to organize design documents because they were getting really unwieldy. See, the problem is that most people are not going to read past the first page or screen of a design document. They're busy, they get things to do. So really, only a designer would read all of the design document. And that's not necessarily the person that's most important to read it. So he looked at this problem and says, okay, well, the solution, use just one page and get your design onto that. Try to capture the design of a system or the design of a feature on just one page. So he took inspiration from like architectural drawings and blueprints. He also took inspiration from these Lego instruction manuals, as well as like these placemats that would collect information together. And so what he did is he started sketching in Adobe Illustrator this kind of isometric looking style and create these kind of like little toy-like pieces to represent what he was looking for. And you know, they actually used this on The Simpsons to sketch out like the map of the Simpsons world. He used this on Spore to design some of the Spore creature evolutions. And so you'll see like these aren't complicated art things. You don't need to be an incredible artist to create this kind of design documentation. In fact, he would create the little things like these trucks and these buildings and stuff, and then save them somewhere we could get at them. And they were really easy to snap and move around and reuse. We use this, for example, you know, to sketch out, you know, how buildings would upgrade, in terms of like their wealth and their size. We can also sketch out more like a diagram of like, what does a sim do when they get up in the morning? Well, are they sick? If so, then they're going to go to the hospital or they're going to stay home. If they're healthy, if they have money, then they're going to go spend it. If they don't have money, they're going to go to their job. That would be great. Or if they're kids, they'll go to school. So for example, you know, what's really cool is you could take these design documents into a meeting and give them to everybody, and people would draw on them and brainstorm and come up with ideas. And it made it really easy to share a design, have everybody understand the design, and to be able to take notes and bring them back to your desk and then create a new version of that design. And people love this so much that they would take the designs and they print them out and they put them around their desks for decorations that are actually useful to refer to. Like nobody wants to go and read your 10-page design document that's like pages of text when they can just look at something like this. And this is applicable to a lot of different kinds of games. If you play the game Journey, this is the design document for the player experience as they go through the different areas of the game Journey. And you know, it demonstrates some of like the narrative aspects and the differentiation between the environments and some of the peaks and valleys in the experience. So the benefits are that for the team, it's easy to share designs. it makes sure that people actually see them and pay attention to them, and you can hand out pencils and encourage participation in meetings. For the designer, it forces a complete understanding. If you can draw that system, you understand it really well. It makes you condense the design down to something as small as possible, and it really highlights things that are systemic in a way that text really doesn't. It also helps with problem solving to see things that you might have missed. So the point is that the goal of the designer is to efficiently communicate ideas. If I can take a lot more time, if it can take a lot more time and effort to create a design document like this, but that's what you're getting paid for. And people will read your designs if you make them interesting like this. So how do you get started to do something like this? There's a lot of different ways you can make these one-page design documents. You could use Adobe Illustrator or Krita's vector tools, pretty much the same. You can export it as a PDF. If you've used Miro, Miro is a collaborative tool for sketching and brainstorming, but it can do stuff like this too, or draw.io. There's also a free program called Inkscape, which is used for vector drawing. In fact, I think, yeah, this is Inkscape right here. It's pretty much the same thing as Adobe Illustrator, but it's free. So it makes a great companion to Krita too. It has some extra tools that Krita doesn't. What are the different ways you can represent your designs? Well, you can just, if it's a system, you can lay it out like this. Although you got to beware that, like, graphs and mind maps like this can get pretty messy. So you want to kind of like, don't try to create this complex spaghetti mess. Instead, kind of like separate it into like isolated systems and then zoom in and zoom out. So here's an example of a mind map that I created for the combat system in Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, using a mind map software that was actually on my phone. And so, I was able to just kind of like try to take an inventory of everything by breaking it down and then coloring it, which is an interesting way of kind of representing it. Storyboarding is a way that you can talk through like the changes that something might go through. It's useful for more than just creating cinematics. You can actually talk about gameplay in regards to the steps that storyboards go through. So this is a storyboard type design I made for a design that we didn't use on Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora called the comms relay. And the idea is that, okay, there's these different sections of the RDA base, and that if you're spotted in one, that if they detect you, they would relay that information to other areas of the base so that those areas could reinforce and go on alert, which meant that it was really smart for the player to infiltrate the base and take out the comms relay first so that they couldn't talk to each other and connect those different things. It wound up being more complex, and we wound up deciding not to use it. If you play the game The Division, this is an example of how the mission director would tell the level designers how to lay out your standard combat encounter in The Division. So there's like, expected player paths, faction signs that let the player know what faction to expect. The kill zone here is where the action happens. That's where the NPCs are going to be spawned. There's always cover approaching the kill zone so that when you get there, you can take cover, because cover shooter is what the Division's all about. And there's the expected primary and secondary paths, and even a way to circumvent the combat if you don't want to go around it. So there was essentially the director saying, this is the proper way to create a combat in The Division. So the point is here, you can take a screenshot and paint over it. And that's a totally viable way of creating this kind of design documentation. In South Park, The Fractured But Whole, before we could create a combat, we needed to propose it. And this was the way that I came up with to do that. It was essentially like to be able to just use like really, really basic icons that anybody could throw together really quickly to represent enemies, the player, their dog, destructible props in the environment, like, and note and call out specific things. And so we would look at this and then say, all right, that seems like it could be pretty cool combat. You can move forward with it. So it was essentially a check or a gate before you could move forward with something. Maps are a great way to represent things. And so, if you're talking about a big space and how you're going to deal with it. So this is a map of the part of Pandora from Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. And you'll see that, what we did was, it's a big open world, but actually the most likely path that most players will take through the game. And so what we did was we colored these areas, like the starting area, the early area, the mid area. You see it kind of expands along the way, but then that's how we determined, okay, this early area should be really low difficulty encounters. This early area, difficulty can get a little stronger here, and so in general, the difficulty of encounters is based on the colors increasing. And then also the outposts in those areas and along the Golden Path, we could determine what difficulty level they should be at. And so I would create this to determine the progression of the game, and I would hand it to the level designers, and they would go in and set the difficulty of the places based on this map. So, I mean, here's an RPG where it's essentially kind of bringing together all the information about a certain faction, the Kinsmen. And it says, that you could compare and contrast the different NPCs. You could see how their skills differ and what some of their personality traits are. And so these are really fun and engaging. For example, for NPC, this is for wildlife senses. Like, okay, if I'm going to create this creature in Avatar, and we want to figure out, like, well, how should his senses be different? Like, for example, their sense of smell, the sense of sight, sense of sound, sense of smell. And we laid this out to make sure that it was really clear. And we could go back and forth with the programmers, and it made it real clear for them to understand expectations. And this, you could write all this down on a page, but it's so much quicker. You can instantly understand a lot of what's going on here. Oh, the immediate radius, the close radius, the intermediate radius, the far radius, and the reactions that they give. A lot of times we'll use these two axis graphs to show how things differentiate. So for example, in Avatar again, we had the Navi weapons in blue, and we had the player the RDA weapons in orange here, and we could make sure that they were different from each other by plotting them along a vertical line of how fast they fire and on a horizontal of their range. So you can see that the shotgun and the spear thrower both have short range. The spear thrower is really slow firing. The shotgun's quite faster firing. The assault rifle is both fast firing and long range, but not as long range as the heavy bow. But the bows in general are slow firing, although the short bow fires fastest of all the bows. And by making sure that things are in different areas, we can make sure that they're distinct. If we put all these on here and they wound up at the same place, then we'd be like, what's the point of having a bunch of weapons that are the same speed and the same range? That doesn't give any interesting variety at all. So a table like this can be really useful. So for example, if you put all your characters on one axis and your factions on another, and say, okay, well, the fire faction fighter is what? The metal faction mage is what? Well, we're not going to have one of those. So the point is that you can plot things in a table and see all the combinations and all the intersections. And that's really useful. Here's an example of a 3 intersection type design. So basically, get comfortable with at least one way to express your designs with images. Build up a library of icons and clip art that you can pull out to use for your designs. And practice creating design docs like this. So, it doesn't take incredible art skills. I don't have incredible art skills, but I've used this a lot. It's not about art skills. You can grab clip art from the internet. Actually, the more simple and more icon-based it is, the better. If it looks too good, that's actually distracting. It's kind of like when we talked about a gray box level for doing level design. It's better to have minimal visuals so that you focus on the design and the what you're doing, because really strong visuals can actually be distracting. So the challenge, if you decide to accept it for the next class, is to either continue working on the game you started or start a new game, create your own 2D art in Krita and add it to the game, And if needed, you can use the tutorial, the demo, the 2D platformer micro game, or any other thing. You can download from the Unity asset store. If you need to get a character controller, if you want props, if you want tiles, there's lots of examples of that stuff in there. So basically, I recommend you try to look for things. It's much easier to start to build a game if you already have something to work with. Especially when it comes to character controllers, which are often a little bit more complicated. We will get into that a little bit later. So yeah, so we're done, I guess, 20 minutes early-ish, but I don't have much more for you, but I'm glad to help you with anything that you have. If you post in the chat, or if y'all in the class hit me up here in the class. But that's it for today. I will finish up the stream and upload it as usual. And then we'll see you for the next class. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.